I sat in my private study at the Boston Public Library, surrounded by rare books and family ledgers, reading Victoria's latest email for the 10th time. Dear Margaret, I refuse to call you Mom. James and I have decided it's best if you don't attend William's first birthday celebration next week. Your working class background simply doesn't fit with the image we're trying to maintain. The Rothschild name means something in Boston society, and having a librarian at our table would raise too many questions. Please respect our wishes and maintain your distance. You can send William's gift through the mail, though please, nothing homemade this time. Those hand-knitted sweaters are terribly common. Victoria Rothschild. The irony of her using my family name while excluding me from my grandson's life would have been amusing if it weren't so painful. The Rothschild fortune she so proudly wielded had been built by my grandfather's careful investments in rare books and manuscripts, a passion I'd inherited along with his business acumen. Ms. Chen. My assistant Rebecca knocked softly. The trust fund request just came through. I minimized Victoria's email and opened the new document. There it was, a $2.3 million withdrawal request for a yacht, justified as a necessary business networking tool for James's new venture capital firm. They've exceeded their quarterly allowance by 300% already, Rebecca noted, placing a cup of tea beside me. And the party planning expenses for William's birthday are extraordinary. I picked up a framed photo from my desk, James as a little boy, sitting on my lap while I read to him in this very library. Back then, he'd understood the value of books over boats, of knowledge over social status. But Victoria had changed all that. Have you seen the party plans? Rebecca asked hesitantly. They've rented the entire Boston Harbor Hotel, hired that celebrity chef from New York, for a 1-year-old who would be just as happy with a cake in the park. I sighed, remembering James's own first birthday. We'd celebrated in the library's rare book room, surrounded by the very volumes that had built our fortune. I opened my grandfather's original trust document, its pages worn with age. The conditions were clear. As trustee, I had full discretion over fund disbursements based on the beneficiary's demonstration of family values, specifically respect for education, cultural heritage, and human dignity. They've also requested access to the summer house in Martha's Vineyard, Rebecca continued. Victoria's planning a series of society events. The same house where I taught James to sail in a small second-hand boat, showing him how the old fisherman navigated by stars instead of GPS. Now Victoria wanted to fill it with Boston's elite, people who measured worth by yacht size rather than character. My phone buzzed. A text from James. Mom, please don't make this difficult. Victoria's trying to build the right connections for William's future. You understand, right? Did I understand? I understood that my Harvard-educated son, who once wrote his thesis on social inequality, was now letting his wife exclude his mother for being too common. Rebecca, I called, please pull up the library's community program records. She brought over another file. For 20 years, I'd run the library's literacy program, teaching immigrant families and underprivileged children to read. Victoria had once sneered that it was cute how I played librarian instead of living off my fortune. Also, Rebecca added, Mrs. Victoria called again about accessing the rare book collection for her women's club event. She still doesn't know you're the head curator. Another layer of my carefully maintained separate life. To Boston society, the library's prestigious Rothschild collection was managed by the mysterious Nestra Chen, my professional name. They never connected it to James's common mother who worked the reading room. I pulled up the trust fund's main account. The quarterly statement showed multiple withdrawals for social advancement, charity galas where Victoria prominently displayed the Rothschild name, yet never actually worked with the causes she claimed to support. Send them the standard rejection form for the yacht request, I decided. Cite the trust's education and culture priorities. Victoria won't be happy, Rebecca warned. She's already told half of Boston about their new summer plans. Then it's time she learned about real planning. I opened a new document and began typing. Dear James and Victoria. Dear James and Victoria, the Trust Committee has reviewed your recent requests and finds them inconsistent with the fund's stated purposes. However, we are pleased to offer alternative support for William's development. Full funding for any educational programs or cultural experiences. Matching donations to legitimate charitable causes you personally work with. Investment in community development projects you actively manage. Please note that all future disbursements will require demonstration of direct involvement in educational or cultural initiatives. Regards, Mr. Chen, Trustee, Rothschild Family Trust. They'll appeal to the board, Rebecca said. I am the board, I reminded her. My grandfather made sure of that after seeing how wealth destroyed his siblings' families. I looked out my study window at the library's community garden, where I taught local children about growing food and reading plant names. Yesterday, Victoria had walked past with William in his designer stroller, not even recognizing her mother-in-law in gardening clothes. What about William's birthday party? Rebecca asked. Send the usual trust fund allowance, enough for a lovely family celebration, not a social spectacle. I picked up the sweater I'd been knitting, tiny cables forming constellations like the ones James and I used to study, and send this to my grandson, with a note. What should it say? To William, some things of real value are made by hand, with love. Maybe someday your mother will understand that. Grandma Margaret. I turned back to my rare book cataloging, the work that had first drawn me to this library 30 years ago. Victoria thought I worked here out of financial necessity. She never knew that I owned most of the priceless volumes she used as a backdrop for her social media posts. One more thing, I added. Please remind Victoria that all Rothschild collection books must be handled by approved curators only. If she wants to display them at her event, she'll need permission from, what did she call me? The common librarian. Sometimes the richest legacies aren't in trust funds or social connections, but in the lessons we teach about true worth. And sometimes the most valuable education comes from learning that real class has nothing to do with excluding others. Rebecca, I called as she turned to leave. What time is story hour today? 3 o'clock, the immigrant family group. The fallout from the yak denial was swift and predictable. Victoria stormed into the library the next morning, designer heels clicking aggressively across the marble floor, making a beeline for where I sat reading to a group of children. This is unacceptable. She waved the trust fund rejection letter. Where is Hamtar Chen? I demand to speak to them immediately. I finished reading the last page of The Giving Tree before looking up. The irony of the book's message wasn't lost on me. Story time is sacred, Victoria, I said calmly, helping a small girl pack up her worn backpack. Even trust fund matters can wait until children's education finishes. What are you? Her eyes narrowed, darting between my face and a letter. You can't be. Mr. Chen, head curator of the Rothschild collection and trustee of the family fund. I confirmed, straightening my simple cardigan. Though you know me better as the common librarian who knits terrible sweaters. She sank into one of the tiny children's chairs, her perfectly curated facade cracking. But all this time, I've been exactly who I've always been, someone who believes wealth is a tool for education and growth, not social climbing. I gathered my reading glasses and stood. Shall we discuss this in my office? The one you've been trying to get an appointment with for months. She followed me in shocked silence through the library's restricted section, past priceless first editions and ancient manuscripts, to the mahogany-paneled study she dismissed as quaint during her last visit. Does James know? She whispered. My son knows I manage the family's academic interests. He doesn't know the full extent because he never asked. I settled behind my desk. He used to care more about what books could teach him than what his bank account could buy him. Victoria flinched at the implied criticism. We're trying to give William the best life possible. By teaching him to judge people by their occupation, to value social status over character. I opened her latest trust withdrawal request. To need a yacht before he can even walk. Those connections are important in our circle. Your circle, I corrected, seems to be getting smaller and smaller. How many real friends do you have, Victoria? Not social allies or business connections, actual friends. She stared at her perfectly manicured hands, silent. When was the last time you did something that actually helped others? I continued pulling up the Trust's original mission statement. My grandfather built this fortune by believing knowledge should be accessible to everyone. That's why he created this library, funded education programs, and established literacy initiatives. Is that why you work here? She asked quietly, when you could just live off the trust. I work here because books changed my life. Because helping a child learn to read is worth more than any yacht. I handed her a folder. These are the real numbers behind your social events. How much goes to actual causes versus appearances? She paged through the documents, her face falling. I didn't realize. No, you didn't. Just like you didn't realize that the common librarian you banned from her grandson's party is the same person who has to approve your trust fund withdrawals. A small commotion outside interrupted us. Through my office window, we could see James arriving with William for their weekly library visit, a tradition he maintained despite Victoria's disapproval. They come every Wednesday, I said softly. James reads to him from the same books that taught him to love learning. Though lately he's been trying to interest William in stories about yachts and social status. Victoria watched as James settled into a reading nook with William, surrounded by children from the community program. Our grandson was happily sharing his board book with a little girl in worn clothes. He doesn't care what they're wearing, I observed. Children never do until we teach them to judge. Victoria's voice cracked. I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I? Several. I agreed, but mistakes can be educational if we let them be. The party can be held here, in the children's reading room, I suggested. With both his grandmother and his community present, the trust will fully fund it, as an educational and cultural event. You'd still let us celebrate here, after how I treated you. That's what family does, I said simply. We teach each other, forgive each other, and help each other grow. Through the window, William's delighted laugh echoed as James did funny voices for each character. For a moment, Victoria's carefully maintained facade crumbled completely. I don't know how to be part of a family like that, she admitted. My world has always been about appearances. Then maybe it's time to read a different story. I pulled out my grandfather's journal. Start with this. Learn why he built this legacy, what he wanted it to mean. She took the worn book carefully, like finally recognizing something precious. And Victoria, I added as she turned to leave. Those hand-knitted sweaters, each constellation pattern represents a story about navigation, survival, finding your way home. I'd be happy to teach you their meaning sometime. She nodded, tears threatening her perfect makeup. I'd like that. William's first birthday party at the library was nothing like Victoria's original plans and everything a celebration should be. Instead of Boston's elite, the reading room was filled with children from our literacy programs, their parents, and the entire library staff. The cake, homemade by one of our immigrant program mothers, featured tiny edible books. Victoria, wearing a simple dress and one of my common hand-knitted shawls, was surprisingly at ease. She sat on the floor with William, helping him share his new books with the other children, her designer shoes discarded under a reading table. Mom, James approached, watching his wife teach a little girl the constellation pattern on her shawl. I've never seen her like this. Sometimes we need to lose our way to find what really matters, I said, adjusting the birthday crown made by our children's craft group. Your father used to say that true wealth is counted in moments, not money. The party featured storytelling sessions in multiple languages, puppet shows performed by our teen reading group, and a treasure hunt through carefully selected sections of the rare book collection. Victoria had helped plan it all, spending hours learning about our community programs. Margaret, she called, waving me over to where she sat with William. Could you tell them the navigation story? The one about the stars on their sweaters. I settled into my familiar reading chair, gathering children around me. Even the adults stopped to listen as I shared my grandfather's tale of how books and stars had guided him from poverty to purpose. That's why we put the North Star on William's birthday sweater, I explained, pointing to the pattern, to remind him that true wealth lies in helping others find their way. Victoria wiped away tears, no longer concerned about her makeup. I used to think libraries were just buildings full of old books. But they're really full of stories that change lives, aren't they? Just like trust funds are meant to be, James added quietly, understanding at last. Later, as the party wound down, Victoria approached my office clutching my grandfather's journal. I've been reading this every night, she admitted. The part about how he funded the first mobile library for immigrant communities. We made you restart that program. I'd opened my desk drawer and pulled out a proposal. The trust committee, meaning me, would certainly support such an initiative, especially if you'd like to manage it personally. Really? Her eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm rather than social ambition. I think I'd like to get my library science degree first. Learn to do it properly. The trust does prioritize education. I smiled. And the library could use another children's reading coordinator. What about our social circle? James asked, bouncing William on his hip. They can either support our community work or find another family name to drop, Victoria said firmly. I'd rather William grow up with real friends than influential connections. As if to emphasize her point, William reached out for Maria, one of our immigrant program mothers who had taught Victoria to bake the birthday cake. Victoria handed him over without hesitation, watching warmly as Maria sang him a lullaby in her native language. We should start a multilingual story hour, Victoria mused, with all our program parents teaching their traditional tales. I sat back, watching my daughter-in-law transform from social climber to community builder. She was already making notes, her designer planner now filled with library program ideas instead of society events. Oh, she paused, looking up. We'll need to cancel the yacht purchase. I'd rather use the funds to expand the children's section and mobile library program. If that's okay with the trust committee. I think the committee would find that an excellent reallocation of resources, I smiled. Though we might need to discuss this over tea and sweater knitting lessons. The next trust fund statement showed a very different kind of spending. Education programs, community initiatives, and a growing collection of children's books in multiple languages. Victoria's social media, once full of luxury lifestyle posts, now showcase story times and literacy achievements. And every Wednesday, 3 generations of our family still gather in the reading nook, wearing hand-knitted sweaters with constellation patterns, sharing stories about what really makes a legacy worth passing on. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't the one kept in trust funds, but the one written in stories, knitted in sweaters, and built in communities. And sometimes the most precious family traditions are the ones that remind us what class really means.